Liat's largest shareholder government says the burden of keeping the airline afloat is too much to place on just the shareholders. Our top story in Caribbean Newsline for Tuesday, October 5. From the CMC News Center in Bridgetown, I'm Ricardo Roberts. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley says regional airline Liat is doomed if the burden of ensuring its survival continues to rest only on the shoulders of its shareholder governments. Barbados is currently the largest single shareholder in the financially strapped airline. Antigua and Barbuda, along with Dominica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and, to a smaller extent, Grenada, are the other governments with a stake in the carrier. Speaking at a CSME town hall meeting on Monday night, Mottley said Liat is a complex issue because the airline has been losing money for a long time. And she says her fellow shareholder leaders are not on the same page on the future of the carrier. The Prime Minister said the burden of Liat was being placed only on the shareholders without recognizing that the airline's routes cannot be sustainable unless they are either financially profitable or economically desirable. She therefore reiterated the need for a minimum revenue guarantee policy.
If they are financially profitable, there is no issue, because the profit is after you've taken into account all of your payments, including the payments that governments are now paying now for the planes. If it is economically desirable, then we need to be able to have a minimum revenue guarantee such that once the load factor of particular routes falls below whatever the agreed average is, be it 65% or 63% or 60%, governments who want to sustain those routes say, I will pay the difference between the two, as we are currently doing with American Airlines, as we are currently doing with Virgin Airways in many Caribbean countries, so that the concept of a minimum revenue guarantee is not alien to us as Caribbean people. Now, if you expect the 3 or 4 shareholder governments alone to carry the burden, you will end up in trouble each time, because it means that at some point they're going to make commercial decisions because there is not a bottomless pit to service it.
Prime Minister Mottley said there are some discussions that have to take place regarding Liat. She said that in the past, shareholder governments agreed the airline needed to be restructured, but only completed phase 1 of that process. The Barbadian leader made it clear that Liat is important for growth in the region and said stakeholders can solve the problem.
But it is going to require us coming together and agreeing, and in fairness, we tried to, but all of the stakeholders were not necessarily on the same page earlier this year. I trust and pray that we can find a common ground for all of the stakeholders, because while Liat 1974 Limited may not be a viable proposition, reasonable, affordable, reliable air travel is the prerequisite for the growth of this region.
During the town hall meeting, Mottley also pointed to the need for reform of the region's integration movement to ensure continuity in the event of a change of government.
In the course of the next 15 months, we will have about 8 general elections within the Caribbean, and therefore the pace and progress of the implementation not only of the single market and single economy, but of other aspects of our integration movement will come to be put under pressure because of the domestic realities. Now, the sustainability of an integration movement ought not to depend on whether a domestic election is being held or not. And it is one of those issues that we will have to come to grips with in terms of reforming our integration movement.
Mottley also called on regional heads of government to meet more frequently in order to advance the integration movement.
In Europe, almost every, maybe because of Brexit we've seen it, but almost every 2 or 3 weeks, the heads of government of the European Movement Union are meeting. But we believe that a smaller group of people needs to meet only twice a year. And what happens in between the 2 meetings then depends on what happens at the subcommittee level or potentially if there is a crisis. That, in my view, has to change if we are going to bring our movement into fully the third decade of the 21st century, which in fact starts in less than 60 days.
Meantime, President of the Caribbean Development Bank, Dr. Warren Smith, says the Caribbean Single Market and Economy, the CSME, is the region's best bet for achieving sustainable economic growth. He said Caribbean countries need to adopt a regional approach to enable their economies to become more competitive on the global stage.
There is an urgency, therefore, for us to accelerate the regional integration movement through the completion of the single market. That urgency is underscored by the worrisome shift towards inward-looking policies and a retreat from multilateralism and globalization in some parts of Europe and in the United States of America, which are traditional trading partners of CARICOM. We at the Caribbean Development Bank are convinced that the CSME is our best bet for unlocking the economic growth potential of CARICOM countries and enhancing the prospects for greater prosperity for our people.
You're watching Caribbean Newsline. Antigua and Barbuda has become the newest member of the Alba Bank. Prime Minister Gaston Brown was in Venezuela's capital, Caracas, on Monday to sign the official inclusion of his country as well as the financing agreement related to the loan of $15.8 million for injection into regional airline Liat. Now, during the meeting, Brown formally deposited the instrument that allowed Antigua and Barbuda to join Alba and expressed satisfaction at the good financial position of the bank, which he said would engender trust and confidence.
The Alba Bank is a very important institution for the region.
El Banco del Alba es una institución esencial para nuestra región.
It was formed through the bold leadership of your late commander, Hugo Chavez Reyes.
Y la razón que hoy que existe este banco fue por la visión del gran líder que fue Hugo Chávez Frías.
And I extend gratitude on behalf of the people of Antigua and Barbuda and the general Caribbean region for the foresight of your late commander.
The governor of the central bank, Mr. Calixto Ortega, welcomed Prime Minister Brown and said how pleased he was that Antigua and Barbuda was becoming the 7th member of the Alba Bank, joining Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, Dominica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Bolivia. The other CARICOM nations in Alba, St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Dominica said they fully supported the bold move by Antigua and Barbuda to join. Still in St. John's, the former head of the Financial Services Regulatory Commission, Leroy King, has lost his fight against extradition to the United States to face fraud charges. On Monday, the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council ruled against him. King has been challenging the extradition warrant issued by former Prime Minister Baldwin Spencer back in 2012 in his capacity as Foreign Affairs Minister. The warrant was issued in response to a formal request from U.S. authorities for King to be extradited to face charges related to the $7 billion Ponzi scheme carried out by former American financier and banker Alan Stanford. Stanford was convicted in 2012 and jailed for a total of 110 years. Attorney General Stedroy Benjamin said now that King has exhausted all the appeals in his 10-year extradition fight, the government is left with no option but to comply with the order of the Privy Council. He said the government will turn King over to the U.S. authorities to face the fraud charges. Guyana could see its economy grow by a further 86% next year after expanding by 4.4% this year. This according to the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. The Washington-based financial institution said that while Guyana's annual gross domestic product is $4 billion, it will expand to about $15 billion by 2024. It says that expansion that will be driven by ExxonMobil's discovery of the oil offshore the country. The IMF calculated that the country's oil sector will represent about 40% of the economy within 5 years. The financial body, however, noted that its forecast may be subject to large revisions since even small changes to the projected oil output in 2020 would result in significant swings in the overall economic performance. The Guyana government expects the initial $300 million a year in revenue from profit sharing and royalties in the oil sector to more than double after a second offshore well starts production around 2022. Still to come, a display of swimwear at a fashion show in a church causes a stir in Trinidad and Tobago. The details when we return.
On this edition of Caribbean Passport, we relive highlights of CariFesta 14's opening ceremony. Lots to do, lots to see as we explore Destination Barbados. And we continue our look into the Sustainable Tourism Conference held in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. All this and more right here on this station.
There are a lot of kids today who are acting out because they don't have the professor or someone who's focused enough or involved enough with that individual to say, you know what, you have something. I'm here to help you discover it.
Yeah, I used to be a school principal of Ross Elementary School in DC and assistant principal of Tapman Elementary School. So I saw firsthand how kids can get discounted very early on in life. And I think that moment when a child is discounted, whether it's a teacher or whether it's the parents.
We continue in Trinidad and Tobago, where photographs of models in swimwear walking down the aisle during a fashion show at the Holy Trinity Cathedral have sparked controversy. The images went viral on social media, with people questioning the appropriateness of having skimpily clad women parade in bathing suits in a church. The show's organizer, Zeta Caribbean Limited, is seeking to clear the air and admitted to a breach by one of the designers. We get more in this TV6 News report.
The controversy and outrage stem from pieces of this swimwear line modeled down the aisle at the Holy Trinity Cathedral for Style Week 2019, hosted by Zeta Caribbean. The church has come under fire for allowing such an event to be held in a place deemed consecrated and holy, with the Trinidad and Tobago Council of Evangelical Churches referring to it as desecration. Dean of the Cathedral, Reverend Shelley Antania, defended the decision on I-95.5 FM, saying guidelines were provided to the organizers, and all designers except one adhered to them.
In this instance, of the 15 designers, yes, who had designs and models and all the rest of it, one designer, yes, and the designer coming down to the end of the show is the person who disregarded the agreement.
Zeta Caribbean says the guidelines were relayed to all designers and admits there was a breach.
When the breach occurred, the designer was already on the runway before we could do anything to get them off.
According to the company's chairman, Alice Briggs, a meeting is scheduled for later in the week to address the issue. Has the organization issued an apology to the church?
We have spoken to Reverend Tina personally, and if it's required, I mean, you know, we can issue a formal apology to the church.
Zeta Caribbean commends the church for what it calls forward thinking in giving the green light for the event, but Briggs believes there is a sexist double standard where public perception is concerned.
A man could walk bareback down the road. If a woman do it, oh my God, it's a big controversy. There were guys who displayed carnival costumes and they were shirtless. That never made the internet. Nobody spoke about that.
And in fact, he says that did not constitute a breach of the guidelines. Briggs tells us the church was chosen for its centuries-old aesthetics.
Did you foresee that it would have sparked some sort of controversy?
Yes.
In this week's Newsline Health, Grenada takes steps to reduce the prevalence of non-communicable diseases. Marie-Claire Williams has the details.
The Grenada Food and Nutrition Council is reviewing its food-based dietary guidelines. This is one of the latest steps being taken by Caribbean countries to reduce the prevalence of chronic non-communicable diseases. Executive Secretary of the Council, Lydia Brown, says they are promoting local and healthier dietary options.
Guidelines are really geared towards persons 2 years and older. And basically what it's doing, the focus a lot is on our local foods, getting people to eat more local, because we recognize that when people eat a lot of food, a lot of the imported foods are a lot of processed foods, not just processed, but heavily processed foods. And so to direct the Grenadian public to move away from these type of foods and move back to some of our traditional foods. We'll be looking at all of this, also showing people on the graphic. It will be displayed showing persons the proportion of food, not that they have to have everything on the graphic on their plate at each meal, but it's actually divided, and based on the division and the size of the division, you will know which category of foods you should be eating more of, which category of foods you should be eating less of.
Representative of the Food and Agriculture Organization, Veronica Morilina, says she is aware of concerns over the prevalence of NCDs across the Caribbean, and the FAO is helping to tackle the problem.
To develop the guidelines, we take into account all the information we have of the country, the health and nutrition problems, the food habits, the food availability, and what people actually do to eat. How do they choose their foods? Then we make the best recommendations to improve their diet.
The Caribbean has the highest mortality rates from NCDs in the Americas. According to Healthy Caribbean Coalition, NCDs account for 3 of every 4 deaths, and 40% of deaths due to NCDs occur prematurely in people younger than 70. Marie-Claire Williams, Newsline Health.
And ahead in sport, Trinidad and Tobago's football boss objects to a document that supposedly shows a local contractor supporting his opponent in the upcoming presidential race. Stay with us. Sport is next.
As a small business owner, you have to make sure your technology is available and operational at all times. But what happens when your network crashes, your email goes down, or your user systems get a virus? You may try to fix the issue yourself, but you can end up making the problem a lot worse. At Digital Networking Solutions, we're more than just people who try to fix your computers. We monitor, maintain, and support your IT systems so that you can focus on growing your business to its fullest potential. When you sign up for one of our IT support plans, we get familiar with your IT environment beforehand, so we can manage it proactively as if it were our own. Your business deserves the best IT services available to ensure it functions to its maximum efficiency. So give us a try today. Email or call us, and we will give you a free network assessment to determine whether now is the time for your small business to adopt Digital Networking Solutions for a smoother, more reliable network experience.
Beside me is Mrs. Pearl Duke, she's a usual patron of the Blue Food Festival in Bloody Bay. Now, Mrs. O, tell me, what keeps you coming back to the Blue Food Festival?
Oh, of course, to enjoy the ambience of this beautiful village, Bloody Bay. Also to enjoy the food that is being prepared, and also, you know, be entertained by the guests we have here today.
And I see you're having an ice cream. Is this dashing ice cream? How's it tasting? Let our viewers know.
Now the process is a little different and it'll surprise you, but you're gonna love the results. So let's get started. We'll start with the sauce for the filling. Place a medium saucepan over medium heat and melt in 8 tablespoons of unsalted butter. Stir in 3 tablespoons of flour and let that simmer for about a minute, whisking constantly. Next, whisk in 1/4 cup of water and 1 cup of sugar.
Full of vultures, boy. Yeah, my body different. I'm a shooter, but I snipe though.
Trinidad and Tobago incumbent football boss David John Williams is crying foul over a document that purports to show a local contractor throwing its support or his support behind his opponent William Wallace in the November 24th race for president. John Williams believes the letter is fraudulent after the contracting company said it never penned any letter supporting a presidential candidate. And as we hear in this report from TV6's Sergio Dufour, he has called on the police to investigate the matter.
Trinidad and Tobago Football Association, David John Williams, says he will be engaging the attention of the police with regards to documents which he believes are of a fraudulent nature that were circulated by the United TTFA slate at the start of their campaign. In the media briefing, Williams read out a letter which he believes is fraudulent.
I called this press conference just to see that as president of the TTFA, I met with them to do some damage control, and the rest is going to be left in the hands of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And I call upon them to investigate this matter seriously because it involves a forged document being used, forged signatures being appended in that document, and that is as much as I will say on this matter.
He thinks it paints the Junior Sammy company in a negative light. The letter from the Junior Sammy group of companies requested that the presenters of the information court immediately remove the false document from its release and to issue a suitable worded retraction regarding such grave misrepresentation, end quote. The letter went on to state that Junior Sammy has supported the various administrations of football and they regretted the unfortunate occurrence. Williams denied that his attempt to bring the letter to light was a ploy to detract attention from the new TTFA slate.
This is not about an election statement. This is about protecting the Trinidad and Tobago Football Association and its corporate partners. People may see it as an election ploy. No, it's not. And this is only one of a few statements that are going to be coming out by the TTFA.
Staying with football, Reggae Boys forward Junior Fleming's first half strike was not enough as heavy favourites Phoenix Rising FC suffered a massive upset, going down 2-1 to Real Monarchs SLC in the Western Conference semi-final last weekend. The 23-year-old gave the host the lead in the 25th minute in a well-worked move, but Jack Blake and Mikhail Chang answered for the visitors in the first half to put their side up at the half-time whistle. Both sides then squandered excellent chances in a goalless second half as Real Monarchs secured a berth in the conference final against El Paso Locomotive FC, who beat Sacramento Republic 3-0 in Texas. Phoenix has entered the playoffs on the backs of a stunning regular season performance, having won 24 of their 34 matches and losing just 4 to top the standings, 18 points clear of the second-placed team. Over to cricket now. Jamaica Scorpions are aiming to break their 7-year title drought when they begin their regional Super 50 campaign on Wednesday. Jamaica defeated Trinidad and Tobago by 5 wickets to win an 8th domestic one-day title. That was back in 2012, but the title has since evaded them. But speaking ahead of the opening match against Barbados Pride in St. Kitts, Scorpions captain Rovman Powell said he and his charges are hungry for success this season.
As I said to the players, it's a championship year for the Scorpions. It's been a few seasons now the Scorpions haven't tasted victory, whether it be Super 50 or 4-day, so that's definitely what I'm trying to do. I try my best to use the team that I have, the resources that I have, and try to make it a title running here.
And Power believes his men need to play consistent cricket if their aim is to win the limited overs series.
What we have to do to have a good Super 50 is that we have to play consistent cricket. We can't just be excellent in 1 or 2 games. We have to play good cricket over the whole duration of the competition. As regards the strength of the team, I'm not sure what the strength of the team is because it's such a balanced team. If we need pace bowlers, if the pitches in St. Kitts are fast, we have good pace bowlers. If the pitches do spin, we have 3 quality spinners in our unit and some other part-time spinners. And also we have a very good-looking middle order, which include myself, Andre McCarthy, Nkuma Banner, and Jeremy Blackwood. I think that is a good middle order.
And defending champions combined campuses and colleges, Marooners will be eyeing the double this season, although they will be coming into the competition with a new crop of players. Head coach Pedro Collins says they will be up for the challenge.
We actually have about 8 to 9 players going to different franchises, which is good for the program, that guys can branch off and play for the islands and stuff like that. We've been working now on the last couple of days, rotation of strike, running hard between the wicket, or fielding, CCC is the team that's striving on fielding, and, we like to at least save 20 to 30 runs in the field every game. So our feeling is a plus. It will be a big plus for us. We lost some exciting players that, Katoy, like Katoy and Curtin, those guys that brought so much in the field. So now we're trying to get it to that standard. So it's a lot of hard work. There's not much time, but we're up to it.
And that's the sports. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Okay, now that that's broken in or cut into the flour, we're going to go in with some fresh ginger, and I love putting tons of ginger when I make kurma. So feel free to put as much or as little as you want. And guys, if you wanted a soft kurma, just add a little bit of baking powder to this and you can get a soft kurma. And I'm gonna go in with some sweetened condensed milk. And I'm just going to mix that in.
You may have heard that you should have disaster supplies on hand, but what should you pack? How to get started? And what maintenance is necessary? Disaster supply kits should include preserved or canned foods, clean water in sanitized containers, at least 5 gallons per family member per day, extra medical supplies such as insulin, inhalers, blood pressure medication,
Again, the major developments of this day, Liat's largest shareholder government says the burden of keeping the airline afloat is too much to place on just the shareholders. And in sport, Trinidad and Tobago's football board subjects to a document that supposedly shows a local contractor supporting an opponent for the upcoming presidential race. That's Caribbean Newsline. Join us again tomorrow. Good night.